Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group, and it is Wednesday, the 28th. So we've got 2 more days of August before we get to the long weekend, and another call it maybe topsy-turvy day today. Very inconsistent, I would say, in the equity market. Today we finished right around the highs of the day. Yesterday we finished on the lows of the day. The day before that, we finished on the highs of the day. The day before that, we finished on the almost on the lows. That's going back to Friday. A little bit off the low. Somebody corrected me on Twitter because Friday we did not finish on the absolute lows, but it was surely a pretty large down day. So what am I trying to get at here? It's been a very inconsistent market. It's one of those. I mean, this is pretty crazy when you when you look at this consolidation. Just kind of just staring at the last 2 weeks. It continues to shake people out, right? Who get positioned too much to one side. I continue to kind of say the same things, especially in the options world. I think positioning lighter on the option side is paramount here. And I think even on the stock side too, which I've been doing, more of which I've been talking about, and then just really looking for some good opportunities where sentiment gets washed out. Right, I think the fear and greed index was around like a 16, so shorting in the hole when that kind of thing happens. Even though, right, we'll look at some charts. We'll talk a little bit about IWM, which had a nice snapback, but I think a lot of people were looking at a possible breakdown, myself included, in IWM, the small caps. I think that was what I sent out on private Twitter. I said, keep an eye on these small caps because we'll go. I'll bring up the weekly chart in IWM, which I think I went over yesterday, but snapped back up 1.1% on the day, but really didn't take back any technical levels. So this is really a day-to-day market. The level that we're going to be watching here is 145.25 at the end of the week, and right now you kind of have a doji, but it is really difficult to say today with things closing on the highs that this isn't going to be another fake out tomorrow. I don't know. And we're seeing basically, and anybody who tells you otherwise, I would tell them that it's a little bit of BS. But I mean, yesterday we saw a lot of put buys in indices. Today we probably saw more call buying. The day before that, I mean, it's basically the action. We saw a ton of action in gold miners and silver miners yesterday. Today, those names underperformed a little bit. Still hung in there, I think. Okay, TLT finished up 10 basis points. GLD finished down 30 basis points or 28 basis points, so not that bad of a day there. But I mean, it's really inconsistent. The one thing that we try to pay attention to is names that we've seen repeat call buying in, like Planet Fitness. We talked about that name a couple times. We started to see calls go into that name towards the end of last week. On the weekly chart, looks pretty nice. It didn't close right on the highs, but this is where we started to see the call buying in Planet Fitness, and we literally have seen call buying, I think, every day since, I think here was the first day. It actually went a little bit lower. You could see, I think, from my Twitter. I think I've tweeted this chart out last week and then tweeted it out again. But those are kind of things that'll give you a little bit more of I think, of an edge when we see that repeat activity, or just anything that's really sharp. Some good questions in the trading room today from, I think, a couple new members. They said, how are you using option activity? And I said, well, first of all, I don't follow option activity. What I kind of do is look for, number one, it helps me with idea generation. So something like this, Planet Fitness, wouldn't have been on my radar had I, hadn't seen the calls go up last week. And then things like this today, like Mastercard, right? Mastercard, that there were some calls that went up today, and we had discussed, we were talking about how they have an analyst day coming up, and I think a broker issued a trade idea talking about going long. I forget which broker it was, talking about going long calls. And that, by the way, that's the 12th. And then someone purchases today Mastercard calls that expire on the 13th. So, those are kind of things. And besides idea generation, it does add to momentum, right? I mean, sometimes if we see calls, a lot of times they're not right off the bat. Just like the Planet Fitness, they were wrong for a couple days. Same thing with a couple other trades that sometimes you can get in a lot cheaper, but it does create momentum, right, in the market when you see buying and everybody starts talking about it. So that's kind of how I use it. I don't follow option activity because we see so many trades that are also wrong on the tape. We just don't hear anybody talk about the losers, as I always like to talk about. Number two, the other thing that we were talking about today is, events for the rest of the week. Sure, it's end of month coming up, so maybe we see a little bit of portfolio rebalancing, but I honestly don't know how you really make predictions day to day with this market, other than just being careful with your positioning, right? I mean, in my opinion, again, video is always for information purposes only, not giving out any advice or recommendations. But when the fear and greed index gets to a 16, do I want to be shorting there? No, absolutely not. I really want to be, managing, looking for trades to the upside at that point when sentiment gets that low. But yeah, this has to play itself out. Other than short-term trading opportunities, I really am not positioning myself too far one way to the other until this kind of shakes itself out in equities, right? And I think if you're trying to really, other than if you're thinking long term, right, that this resolves itself to the upside, as stocks normally do, right? Stocks go up over time. But I think if you're looking for a signal, we don't have one yet, other than every time we seem to get, when the sentiment gets really, really shifted to one side, then we either get a sell-off when things get a little bit too bullish, or when things get really bearish and sentiment gets washed out, like a fear and greed index of 16. Then you try to look for positions on the long side, and that's just how it's been working lately. I mean, this has been a complete mess this month of August. So it's trendless in equities. And we'll just kind of have to see where we go from here without any major signals. Again, I was making a joke this morning, but I think it's true. As I said yesterday, even though TLT kind of gave back, I think TLT started the day up around 0.5%. It was bid pre-market, like it's been doing, which is again pretty crazy, right? When you think about how the market traded today. This was TLT this morning, rallying as usual, and perhaps there was somebody taking profits in this a little bit today. Same thing with gold. If you look at so it's even tough to look at pre-market activity. Gold was rallying up until about 8 o'clock this morning, and then kind of, I think, just an inside day for gold. But just like with gold, and I think we talked a little bit about that yesterday, you want to be careful of chasing in anything right now in this market. So what did I do today? I was looking for opportunities. Here's my trade blotter, which I always am transparent with what I'm doing. But Home Depot, right? I've been talking about Home Depot, thinking it would be a nice hurricane type trade. Also, the technicals lined up pretty good. I tweeted out Home Depot, I think on Monday night, a chart of Home Depot. If not, it was earlier in the week. Or last week, but nice consolidation, so I think this is a nice hurricane trade. So what I did was I did trade this using options, and I got out of Home Depot here, 750 paid 580. Granted, I took several targets, and then I rolled the profits. Again, I want to stay in Home Depot. I think Home Depot has a chance to go higher. Who knows with this market, but but I am playing for a further breakout in Home Depot. Another name that I like, kind of sticking to some blue chip names, is McDonald's. McDonald's has been consolidating here for a little bit, had good earnings. The market's been tough, but these are something where consolidating in an uptrend is kind of what I like to look for. Names that saw option activity, MasterCard too. MasterCard is one of those names that I like to to look at. We were looking at both these, both Mastercard and Visa this morning. Again, just sticking to a little bit more quality names. Even Visa looks like it underperformed a little bit, but still, it was down 1% to open. That's why you see a green bar here for the day. Option activity, I mentioned. MasterCard, we saw late day call buyer, which I believe is a call buyer of CDNS. Cadence, a name that's kind of gotten beaten up below the 50-day moving average, but maybe somebody thinking it's gone down a little bit too much. So Cadence was one name, CDNS. Right, September 70 calls active there in the last 15 minutes of the day, and it does look like they bought at a little bit of a higher price. This one went up above the ask. These calls were really wide. I was watching the bid-ask spread, so probably a broker printing them in this trade. Other names that caught my eye for the day. What else do we see today? There was some IWM calls as well. So I think IWM will be something important to keep your eye on. We saw a lot of XRT calls. That was actually your best performing group today. If we go and look at the performance of the day, again, kind of the opposite. Again, the opposite of yesterday. Most things sold off in the equity world besides the gold miners. If you remember, I had this spreadsheet up yesterday and everything was red. So today everything is green. So again, I really think right now, you just have to kind of roll with the punches and really try not to get overexposed in any direction. And the market, if you're kind of in that neutral state of mind or positioning pretty neutral, you could play this market to both sides, right? The way that we're kind of trending. But yeah, I mean, look at retail. XRT was up 2.8% for the day. Small caps and Dow stocks were the big mover from the open. Everything else did pretty well too. So looks like there was just some buying or there's short. Who knows? Buying or short covering today? Don't know. And then the defensives kind of sold off a little bit. Interesting, the software group. Some names after the close, and I'll kind of leave it here for the day. But these software names just seem like they're having a harder and harder time rallying. Yesterday we saw two names report in this group. Autodesk, which nicely came back all through the day, even though they lowered their guidance. But Viva Software, which had good numbers and initially sold off too. You can see it looks like it's trading down a little bit. So these names, it just looks like they are, even though I've been a big fan of this group, I was on Bloomberg earlier in the week talking about this group as a good hiding place in the trade war. But the earnings reports have been tough. The best trade that's been working out for this group is to sell premium, but it just looks like it's carrying the trend of predictability is very difficult, right? Okta is normally a name that does pretty well on earnings, but I didn't trade it just because the trends just are not being, I mean, look at the performance of Okta. It's a very good name on earnings, and the name is down a little bit. Williams Sonoma had a great quarter last time around. Right, here's Williams Sonoma, a really nice really nice performance usually after earnings. They raised their numbers. They did it. It looks like if you read their quarter, the numbers, they did everything right, and they're now down on the day. So, it's the best thing I would say right now until this market kind of straightens itself out a little bit and shows some consistency to it, or maybe this needs to happen with the trade war. This trade war needs to go away. I don't know how much longer the consistency will continue. The inconsistency will continue, but it seems like the trade war is going to have something to do with it. So, again, I'm not the biggest. My day trading is not my favorite thing to do all the time, but it seems like that's giving the most opportunities on a day-to-day basis. All right, guys, have a great night, and I'll see you tomorrow.